Hello there, and welcome to the Chill Dude in a Couch. And today I'm not in a couch, I'm in a chair because today I'm chilling with a book. And for today, the first book that I decided to cover, it's a book that is related to music because since I cover so much music in this channel, I thought it was smart to start with a book. And I'm talking about Matt Pinfield's book, All These Things That I've Done, My Insane Improbable Rock Life, Music, Mayhem, and MTV. And this book, if you don't know who Matt Pinfield is, he went to become more famous in the 90s as an MTV Vj. He used to host 120 Minutes, which was the show where they highlighted more the alternative bands, rock bands. And he was a VJ that I looked up to because he had a lot of music knowledge. And he wasn't only just interviewing bands, asking them like superficial questions. No, he went deep. He knew when they released the single, where they recorded the single, and to who they dedicated the single. He knew like the darkest, most obscure knowledge of an album that you could find. And that's why I loved watching him on TV. And when I heard a few years ago that he had a book, I'm like, I gotta read his book because I've been a fan of his ever since the 90s. And this book, it's very entertaining. Even if you're not a music fan or anything like that, I think it's a book you could read because it's not a hard to read book. The book basically goes into his childhood, how he got into music, how he built his brain to like retain so much information, and then it goes until when he goes and becomes like a DJ in college, and then how he finally joins MTV and how it was a struggle for him at first to join MTV because most of the MTV VJs, were like supreme good looking, like they had this look. And Matt Pinfield, was a normal looking dude who basically loved music and had a first and knowledge that to me, he is the encyclopedia of music. Like I've admired him for so many years. And this book, it has some great stories on it and some great encounters. The book starts basically with an introduction from Paul McCartney introducing, the book and talking about Matt Pinfield and what he thinks of him. And if Paul McCartney, a Beatle, is talking so highly about him, the guy is, a legend in music encyclopedia. So this book it has very interesting chapters, and on every chapter he goes into 50 essential albums from a decade. He starts with the 60s, then he goes to the 70s, 80s, 90s, and all the way up to the 2000s. And I love that part because I went through those lists and there's albums that I've heard of and I have, but there were some albums that I didn't know of. And I'm like, wow. It made me go and search music and listen to them, and he's so right in what he says about bands and what is essential to him. The book also has some great encounter stories about him meeting Lou Reed, the Ramones, the Killers, there was a time where he was an A&M and he tried to sign them. I don't think it happened, but he became a friendship with them, and Brandon from the band actually has a song on the Hot Fuzz album called All These Things That I've Done that was inspired by him talking to Matt Pinfield. So that's great stories, great anecdotes. He has stories, encounters that he has with Oasis. He has one very interesting one about Coheed and Cambria and how he discovered the band and he knew that they were going to be huge, and he actually promoted the band. And yes, Coheed and Cambria is a huge prog band that back into the 2000s they weren't that known, but now everyone knows them. So the book also goes a lot into his MTV years, how he was the host of 120 Minutes. He wasn't the first person to be considered, but after they saw the knowledge that he had, he was the guy, and he was so great in that program. I religiously on Sundays watch 120 Minutes because I love seeing Matt Pinfield's interviews, because his interviews, he asked the questions that no one asked, and his knowledge and his passion for music showed in the interviews, and it also shows in this book. This book is amazing. You know, it's an amazing read. It's a book that you can read very easily. You know, it's not a huge, very long book. So it goes into all the stories. He also talks about Nirvana. He talks about what Nirvana meant to him and how it changed the music in the 90s. He talks about the very famous MTV bus clips, which back in the day in the 90s, the bus clips were those bands that generated a buzz and could actually blow up. And he was in charge of sometimes picking those bands because he had a great eye for what bands were going to blow up and what bands should be in your radar. There's also some great encounters about U2, Kiss, some hilarious anecdotes that I think any music fan would enjoy. So to me, it was like really interesting that I saw that I didn't see any review on YouTube about this book. And I'm like, you know, this is a shame because this book is a great book. And I thought like the first book review that I need to do needs to be related to music, because that's what this mostly channel is about. And I would recommend this book to anyone who wants to know more about music history, and especially how MTV was back in the 90s. And also it goes into what he did after MTV, because he's been active ever since, and he's just a guy that knows a lot of music, represents the band, and this book shows how much he really loves music, and it tells a lot about how he grew up. It's not if you're thinking about like a book about old sex stories, this is not Motley Crue. This is more a book about music knowledge and about the passion that he has for music. So if you like this review, you know, give it a like, subscribe. Let me know if there's any books that you would like me to review in the future, and I'll see you on the next Chilling with a Book. Until then, bye-bye.